All right, hello and welcome to the Daily Faded. My name is Hetz, and this is where we get faded daily and talk about politics and news. So we've reached the dreaded milestone that we kind of knew was coming for a long time now, which is we have 100,000 dead Americans in the United States due to COVID-19. There's over 5.6 million cases worldwide, over 352,000 deaths worldwide, 1.7 million plus cases in the United States, 100,163 deaths in the United States. California, we've got 99,776 cases, so we're just around the 100,000 case mark in California. And we've had 3,852 deaths. Brazil is now second in the world in confirmed cases with 392,360 and 24,000 plus deaths. The indigenous population in Brazil is twice as likely to die from COVID-19 or be infected. Maybe it's be infected. The Amazonian city of Manaus has been hit very hard, and Manaus is a place that a lot of indigenous people travel to. There's a lot of travel back and forth from Manaus, so that is getting into indigenous areas in Brazil. The New York Times ran I believe they ran 1,000 names of the 100,000 names of people who have died, and gave a little bit of coverage about many of them. It was a very powerful piece. On Friday, Trump declared churches and other houses of worship as essential services that cannot be closed down, and basically said he would take on any governors who tried to close them down. But what I really want to tell you about is the new plant in my backyard. I got a small gelato strain of cannabis in my backyard, planted it. I'm very happy about that. So we'll be following its growth. It's just a tiny little sapling. I don't know, is that the right word? Is that only for trees? I don't know. But it's a tiny little plant right now. Sorry, I don't have a picture of it for you, but we will. Tonight's show might be a little bit on the short side. I apologize for that. I was feeling a little under the weather today. A distinct picture of two very different former presidential candidates. Marianne Williamson endorsed a whole slate of progressive contenders in House races around the country, including Shahed Buttar. Yeah, is it a sapling? Is that right, Tanya? So Marianne Williamson endorsed Shahed Buttar, who's running against Nancy Pelosi in San Francisco. And she also endorsed Michaela Wilkes and a bunch of other really great progressives, and was interviewed and said that she thought the Democratic Party would die if not for progressives moving in to take over the party. On the flip side, a different progressive candidate for president, Elizabeth Warren, is holding a high-dollar fundraiser for Joe Biden on June 15th, showing that her principles are malleable as necessary for political convenience. She railed against big dollar fundraisers early, and then after a while got her own super PAC, and yeah, so she never really believed that stuff about not catering to big donors. A woman named Amy Cooper was trending on Twitter today. You may have heard this story. She was trending along with the trend hashtag Central Park Karen. Karen being a particularly poignant dig on Twitter, I guess. Karen basically means dumb white woman, something like that. Anyway, there's a video of this woman, Amy Cooper, being racist that got shared over 34 million times. In the video, she's been asked by the person shooting the video, Christian Cooper. I'm sorry, I have his name wrong. Anyway, she's being asked by the person shooting the video to please leash her dogs per the park rules. He does nothing threatening on camera and is actually quite polite to her. She virtually tortures the dog, trying to hold it while she calls 911 to tell the police that she's being threatened by a black man. And those were the words she used. She says, "I'm going to call the police and tell them I'm being threatened by a black man." All he had done was ask her to please leash her dog. The dog is freaking out, and she can't handle the dog. She can't hold the dog. She approaches him to try and get him to stop filming, and he says, "Please stay away." So she breaches the 6-foot etiquette. While she's calling 911 to tell them that a black man is threatening her. She's basically flipping out because he's black, because he's taping her. Who knows? All of it. Apparently, she worked for Franklin Templeton, and they fired her over this. They tweeted that they don't accept racism. It's a mild incident of racism compared to ones in which people die, but it hits the mark. And it really hits the mark. Now, does she deserve to lose her job over it? I'm not sure. I think people make mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes are racist mistakes. I'm not sure being in Central Park and making a mistake on your own private time deserves you getting fired and losing your job. I'm just not sure. Maybe it does. Maybe that's the only way to really stem the flow of this kind of racism everywhere. But it's emblematic of the bigger problem we have today. The Daily Beast, "I cannot breathe. Black man dead in Minneapolis after video shows white cop kneeling on his neck." Quote, "A black man has died in Minneapolis, George Floyd, after a disturbing video showed a white police officer kneeling on his neck," according to the Washington Post. The man, who is identified Tuesday as George Floyd, can be heard shouting in the video, "I cannot breathe, I cannot breathe, and don't kill me." The Minneapolis Police Department confirmed early Tuesday that the man, who was believed to be in his 40s, died of a medical incident after police responded to a report of a forgery. The statement said the man appeared to be suffering medical distress, so he was transported to hospital, where he later died. Floyd's family has hired civil rights attorney Benjamin Crump to represent them. In the video, witnesses can be heard telling the officer to get off the man's neck. One said, "You're going to just sit there with your knee on his neck?" Another asked, "Did you kill him?" Darnella Frazier, who shared the video on Facebook, said, "The police killed him, bro, right in front of everybody. The FBI and state authorities are reportedly investigating the death." There was an update per CNN later that the 4 officers involved have been fired. Now, this is largely because of a lot of outside pressure from organizers in Minneapolis who have been demanding reforms of the police department. Minnesota has one of the worst rates of African Americans dying at the hands of white cops. Benjamin Crump, the attorney they mentioned, is also Ahmaud Arbery's attorney. Clearly, he's trying to make a name for himself and fighting these kinds of cases. I don't mean to say that as a slight to him, but he is going after these cases, clearly. We really need to institute major police reform because it's not going to happen on its own. The racist culture in police departments around the country is not going to fix itself. So it's got to be fixed in training. And the violence of police departments around the country is not going to be fixed by itself. So it has to be fixed in training. Officers need to be trained in de-escalation. I remember reading someplace that at the police academy, I don't know where it was, at one police academy, they got 1 day in de-escalation while they got weapons training the entire time they were there. That's not to say that they shouldn't have weapons training. Of course they should. But they really need to have more de-escalation training. And this situation could have been de-escalated very simply by taking the man and putting him in the back of the squad car instead of kneeling on his neck. There was a line in the movie Waco that I watched a few weeks ago on Netflix where one of the cops is talking to another cop, and he's talking about, they're having the argument between using force and using negotiations to end the siege at Waco. And the cop who's in favor of force says, "There's 500 civilians for every cop in this country. We have to show them force in order for them to respect us." And I thought that summed up the way that a lot of people probably think. And I'm not just saying it's a mentality among cops. I think it's a mentality among a lot of people. And it's too bad. Trump went insane on Twitter this weekend. The 538 approval rating tracker found that Trump's average disapproval rating stands at 53.5%, or did yesterday, putting it at its highest level since mid-January. Now, Trump's freaking out because his ratings are in the toilet. His approval numbers are in the toilet. But the crazy thing is that his disapproval numbers should be like 70%. I mean, 100,000 Americans have died, and 83% of them were preventable deaths, according to what the studies have told us. So the numbers should be far worse than 53.5% disapproval. Far worse. But nonetheless, Trump lost his shit and went all crazy over the weekend. And one thing that he was tweeting about was Joe Scarborough and a ridiculous conspiracy theory that Joe Scarborough killed one of his former staffers. This is from the Washington Post. Widower of late Scarborough staffer seeks removal of Trump tweets. The widower of a former congressional staff member for Joe Scarborough has asked Twitter Chief Executive Officer Jack Dorsey to delete tweets by President Trump, furthering a baseless conspiracy theory about his wife's death. My request is simple. Please delete these tweets, Timothy Klausutis wrote in a letter to Dorsey, seeking his intervention as Trump continues to suggest that Scarborough, a former Republican congressman from Florida who is now an MSNBC host, was responsible for the 2001 death of Lori Klausutis. In a statement Tuesday, Twitter expressed sympathy for the Klausutis family, but gave no indication Trump's tweets would be deleted. With no evidence, Trump has continued to push a conspiracy theory that Scarborough, while a member of Congress, had an affair with his married staffer and that he may have killed her, a theory that has been debunked by news organizations, including the Washington Post, and that Timothy Klausutis called a vicious lie in his letter to Dorsey. On Tuesday morning, Trump went on Twitter again to advocate opening of a cold case against psycho Joe Scarborough, which he said was not a Donald Trump original thought. So many unanswered and obvious questions, but I won't bring them up now, Trump added. Law enforcement eventually will, a question mark. So I'm no fan of Joe Scarborough, but obviously this is ridiculous. This conspiracy theory is so cheap and obviously untrue. One thing Joe Scarborough has proven very effective at is skewering Donald Trump. He goes after Donald Trump on a daily basis, and he is the vanguard of the Never Trump Republican. I don't know. I think he may actually be a Democrat now. I'm not sure. But Mika Brzezinski got all excited about this on Morning Joe as well. And she demanded a phone call with Jack Dorsey, which of course was scheduled because she's Mika Brzezinski and she's rich and famous. So she gets to talk to Jack Dorsey. Howie Hawkins or Jordan Chariton say something true and they get their accounts suspended. They don't get to call Jack Dorsey. But Mika Brzezinski does. I mentioned that Joe Scarborough skewers Trump a lot, and he does, but mostly he skewers him around the coronavirus issues. He never takes him on, never takes him to task for his other policies being bad. He's more of a Russiagator than someone who discusses policy. So he's really still a Republican. But Trump mocking Joe Biden for wearing a mask at a Memorial Day event, attacking Pelosi and Stacey Abrams on Twitter, he really seems to have lost his mind. And then adding to this story from the New York Times, Twitter added labels to President Trump's tweets for the first time on Tuesday. The social media company added a link to two of Mr. Trump's tweets in which he had posted about mail-in ballots. The link urged users to get the facts about voting by mail. Mr. Trump has tweeted several times about mail-in ballots in recent days, accusing California, Michigan, and other states of enabling voter fraud by distributing mail-in ballots during the coronavirus pandemic. Voting by mail would be substantially fraudulent, Mr. Trump tweeted on Tuesday. A Twitter spokesman said the tweets contained potentially misleading information about voting processes and have been labeled to provide additional context. They put a label on it saying something to the effect of "find out the truth about voter fraud." I'm not quite sure how that looks. I didn't even bother going to look at the tweets because I prefer not to look at Donald Trump's Twitter page if I can avoid it. So, like I said this was going to be a little bit of a shorter show tonight because I wasn't feeling all that well today. Thank you guys for hanging in there. Please subscribe and press the like button, and I'll be back with a longer show tomorrow night at 8 o'clock Pacific, 11 o'clock Eastern. Peace out.